Welcome back to Philosophy and Ethics in Games, the series where I break down the stories in some of our favorite games and ask the tough questions to figure out what is right and what is wrong. I'm Josh Bearheart Hawk, and today we're heading to the desert town of Sandy Shores to meet one of the most controversial characters in gaming in Grand Theft Auto V. In case you missed any of the previous episodes in the Philosophy and Ethics series, I've linked a playlist in the description below. As I continue to break down this and other games, I'll add new videos to the playlist so you can find them all in one place. 9 years prior to the start of the events of Grand Theft Auto V, Michael Townley was part of a small group of thieves that worked up near the Canadian border. He'd been in the game for years, enough time to make a decent chunk of cash, and to meet a woman that would eventually wind up becoming his wife and the mother of his children. At some point in this time frame, he would pick up a couple of younger men who were in need of a mentor figure and begin teaching them the ropes and forming them into a crew that would rob places all over the state of North Yankton. The first that he would meet was a man by the name of Trevor Phillips, and the second was a man that Trevor would actually wind up growing quite close to by the name of Brad Snider. Together with Lester Crest, the crew seemed unstoppable, but Michael found himself worrying more with each passing day about being caught. He didn't want to wind up dead or behind bars, leaving his wife and kids alone with no real prospects for a better life, and he started looking for a way out. He would find that way out through Dave Norton, an agent with the FIB, GTA's version of the FBI. Dave was an up-and-coming agent at the FIB and was on the verge of getting a major promotion when Michael approached him with a deal. He would hand over his crew, giving Dave a bust that would skyrocket his career in exchange for the agent helping him to start a new life. The plan was simple. Michael and his accomplices would rob a cash depot in London North Yankton. The authorities would be waiting to bust them, and in the end, Dave would shoot Trevor Phillips and Michael, and Brad would be captured and thrown into prison. If all went well, Trevor would be killed in the shootout, Michael would be wounded enough to fake his death but able to still walk away, and Brad would wind up behind bars for a long time with no idea what had happened, while Dave used the bust to advance his career. But things didn't go quite as planned. Just as Dave was taking his shot, Brad stepped in front of Trevor and all hell broke loose. In the end, Brad died of his injuries, Michael survived, and Trevor got away thanks to a snowstorm covering his tracks. Now, for a minute here, we're going to take a slight detour from the story, because the initial question that jumps to my mind is, why would they need to shoot Trevor? Would things have played out a different way if that had happened instead? This is a light spoiler for later on in the game, and for future episodes of Philosophy and Ethics in Games for this particular game, but it turns out that Trevor was kind of a loose cannon, whereas Brad was a little more stable. We can see that after Agent Norton shoots Brad, Trevor reacts quickly, running for cover as Michael waits out in the open for his turn to be shot. I think, and this is only light speculation, that Michael expected that Brad would surrender when he saw his two companions lying on the ground with bullet wounds, making the capture easy for Agent Norton and giving them two bodies and a conviction to boot. But Trevor is more unpredictable and wasn't going to give up so easily. His fight or flight response is geared extremely heavily in favor of fight, and he wound up shooting back until it was clear he had no other choice but to run away. In the end, he escaped, leaving the plan one conviction short, but still allowing Agent Norton to get his promotion and giving Michael a chance to get out of the game alive. In the intervening years, the FIB was able to establish contact with Trevor, though they didn't have an exact location on him. He believed that Michael had died in the failed heist, and that Brad was in prison. And he started writing letters and emails to Brad at some point, with the FIB taking the opportunity to roleplay in an attempt to convince Trevor to turn himself in. Of course, that wasn't something that he was willing to do, and instead he established his own criminal enterprise and moved to an area just north of Los Santos, a desert town by the Alamos Sea known as Sandy Shores. And that's where we first meet Trevor, as he's spending some quality time with the girlfriend of the leader of a biker gang known as the Lost MC. As they're hanging out, he happens to have the TV on in the background with the local news play. They're covering the story of a recent jewelry store robbery, and a reporter is interviewing a man who had direct contact with the robbers. It wouldn't really be much of a note in Trevor's eyes until the man mentions something that one of the thieves said to him. He can't remember the exact quote, but he knows it was something along the lines of, "You forget thousands of things every day, man. Make sure this is one of them." That phrase in particular catches Trevor's attention because it sounds awfully close to the catchphrase his dead friend Michael used to use. It was even among one of the last things that he heard Michael say as they were robbing the cash depot.
"I saw your face, I'll remember you."
"You forget 1,000 things every day. How about you make sure this is one of them?"
To Trevor, this brings up a lot of questions and emotions. But the chance for answers to those questions won't come for a little while yet. After everything fell apart with Michael and Brad, Trevor wound up striking out on his own, eventually founding his own company known as Trevor Phillips Enterprises, or TPI for short. TPI isn't exactly on the level, legally speaking, but we'll get there. A quick aside, as I know there will be comments about this, but TPI stands for Trevor Phillips Industries, or Trevor Phillips Incorporated, which seem to be used interchangeably with Trevor Phillips Enterprises. It's never really laid out that one is correct over the others in the game, and I'm just going to stick with TPI for the sake of clarity when referring to Trevor's company. Feel free to let me know in the comments if I missed some detail in the naming there, but let's move on for now. Staying focused on the moment, we get a glimpse early on of Trevor's intense mood swings as he winds up beating the leader of the Lost MC, a man named Johnny, to death just feet away from his front door. Johnny came to confront Trevor for stealing his girlfriend, and Trevor apparently wasn't in the mood. He seems to go from one extreme to the other, as he yells at and belittles Johnny before acting like he is consoling him, and then ratchets things right back up to 11 as he throws Johnny to the ground and stomps on him until he's dead. Over the course of the game, we'll see this particular behavior from Trevor come up quite a few times. And while the game doesn't really lay out any diagnosis, I think it's prudent to explore his mental state a bit and try to figure out just who he really is and what makes him tick. It would be easy to just brush him off as a psychopath and call it a day, but I don't think that's really the case here. One possibility, at least for the violent outbursts and mood swings that we see from Trevor, especially in this early peak, would be a condition known as intermittent explosive disorder. According to the Mayo Clinic, intermittent explosive disorder involves repeated, sudden bouts of impulsive, aggressive, violent behavior or angry verbal outbursts. The reactions are too extreme for the situation. Road rage, domestic abuse, throwing or breaking objects, or other temper tantrums may be symptoms of intermittent explosive disorder. It's also possible that Trevor is suffering from something like bipolar disorder, which shares some traits with IED. But whatever is going on, it's clear that he's suffering from some kind of mental health issues, and he really should be getting some kind of treatment. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that he needs to be on meds, as many mental health issues and disorders, IED included, can be managed with the right application of therapy and self-awareness, and only a licensed psychiatrist can say whether or not medicine would be helpful in treating these kind of things on a per-person basis. Whatever is causing the violent mood swings, Trevor carries the rage with him as he piles the closest thing he has to a group of friends, a pair of men known as Ron and Wade, into his truck and heads out to take down the rest of the Lost MC biker gang. On the one hand, you might argue that Trevor is over the top in his behavior here, as he's already taken out their leader. But this spree might be more about survival than anything else. We'll find out in a bit that Trevor has been competing with a few groups in the area for business, with the Lost MC being among those groups. And with all of them being outright criminals, it kind of makes sense that Trevor would be so literally cutthroat. In a more formal business setting, where companies and competitors involved are fighting each other over things like shares and profit margins for legal goods and services, we might expect to see similar activity, just in a little bit more of a polite sense. Instead of killing off the rival group, you might buy them out and gut their company. The result is ostensibly the same, just with less blood. And taking it even further, this is really more or less a hillbilly version of the Mafia if you really stop to think about it. Trevor would be the leader of his own crime family, as small as that might be, with Johnny leading the Lost MC and other people leading other groups that we'll meet later on. Mafia families were rivals of each other, and while they tended to stick to their own territory, the occasional war would erupt and people would wind up dead. In this case, in true hillbilly fashion, Trevor is not only the Don, but is also the enforcer as he decides to wipe out one of his rivals in a wild display of bullets and grit. But he doesn't stop with the Lost MC. He also swings by a trailer housing the leader of another rival group, the Aztecas, and takes him out as well. Having his fill of chaos for the day, Trevor winds up sending Wade to Los Santos in search of any possible trace of Michael Townley, before heading home and getting some rest. But wiping out some of the competition was just the beginning. After all, you can't make money without finding the right partners. Heading to the local watering hole, Trevor meets up with a man named Mr. Chang and his translator. Mr. Chang's father is apparently interested in partnering with a legitimate criminal enterprise in the area, and he's sent his son to check out the options, though he might have been better off sending literally anyone else. Chang seems to be high as a kite the whole time, demonstrating why it's never a good idea to sample the prospective merchandise in these kind of business deals. And even Trevor is about to walk away until the translator steps in and begs him to hear the potential offer out. Climbing in his car with the potential investors, Trevor heads over to the main home of his operation and winds up needing to spend a few minutes defending the place from a very angry group of Aztecas. They're seeking revenge for their fallen leader, but in the end, they all join him instead. The event doesn't exactly bode well for Trevor's chances at signing a contract with Mr. Chang, but I can't help but wonder what the men expected. They're getting involved in the rural politics of organizations that run drugs and guns out of the American Southwest. There's going to be some less than ideal moments here. And those less than ideal moments continue for Trevor as he's forced to act once more against the Lost MC, as the biker gang just refuses to go away despite his best efforts. They've got control of an airfield in the area that would be extremely beneficial for Trevor Phillips Enterprises to hold. And in an attempt to secure the airfield, wipe out more of the Lost MC, and steal some of their product, Trevor and Ron head over there and attack. They're able to wipe out quite a few of the bikers before stealing a couple of their planes and flying off to deliver the cargo to some of Trevor's contacts at sea. I'll be honest here. To this point, these missions with Trevor have been an absolute blast to play through. Juxtaposed with Franklin and Michael and the city life that they are steeped in, Trevor's life feels like some kind of non-stop action movie. He's constantly feuding with rival groups, blowing things up, running all over the county, and now stealing and flying planes to drop stolen cargo off. It's a fast-paced, adrenaline-fueled life, and I'm here for it, despite Trevor's apparent inclination to kill everyone that he meets. And that pace doesn't slow down as Trevor meets again with the potential Chinese investors and finds out they've decided to work with the only other remaining group in the area, the O'Neill brothers. The O'Neills are a large family organization that operates out of their home just east of Sandy Shores. Making his way to their house, Trevor dispatches the majority of them before laying a trail of gasoline on his way out and setting the whole thing on fire. And let's spend just a few minutes to talk about these groups that Trevor has been fighting, as this hit on the O'Neill brothers is really the final big moment before Trevor heads off to Los Santos. From the outside looking in, it's easy to judge these groups as backwards, or say that they're bad or wrong for living their lives in what most would see as criminal or lower class ways. We've seen the Lost MC, a group of bikers that has their own code and ways of doing things. They are probably the most tame of the groups, as they almost seem more like nomads than a permanent fixture in the area. And before you go into the comments to yell at me, I know the Lost MC originated with a DLC for GTA 4. But that story is one for another time, and we're focused here on what we've seen of them in the game to this point. Then there's the Aztecas, a group that we don't know a whole lot about other than that they were run by a man named Ortega and controlled the gun trade in the area. Trevor took care of Ortega pretty early on, and we don't see much from the group outside of the assault on Trevor's meth lab when the group tries to take revenge on him. Finally, the O'Neill brothers, which seem to be the largest and most well-organized group in the Sandy Shores area. If I had to guess, I'd say that they've probably been established for a while, likely inheriting the organization that they have rather than building it from the ground up. Those three groups, along with Trevor Phillips Enterprises, have been more or less running the area for likely several years, and were really only able to operate because of something that we lightly touched on when we talked about Franklin. Poverty is a topic often brought up in political campaigns, but something that is never really addressed when it comes time to actually fix problems in society. It's something that many people are born into or get stuck in due to circumstance, and there's really no reliable way to get out of it once you've become trapped. The Sandy Shores area is a great example of one where the people who live there have just been kind of forgotten about by society writ large. It's in a desert, miles from any big city, where the populace spends the entirety of their lives with very few people moving out and no one moving in. There are no good economic opportunities, with the majority of the jobs in the area being dead-end service industry positions where the employees would be lucky to make enough just to make ends meet. For the majority of the people who live in the area, they'd likely say that they're just fine with living the simple life. They enjoy the peace and quiet of the desert and just like being left alone to their own devices with little or no intervention from the government. But not all of them would feel that way. And some from outside the area would take advantage of the lack of any kind of government presence for their own nefarious purposes. Those who want bigger and better things, like the O'Neills, use the lack of any real government in the area as well to establish themselves as drug dealers. They focus on making and selling meth, or in some cases other drugs, with no regard for how what they're selling impacts the people becoming hooked on it. They make a decent amount of money, but for the most part, they aren't really a threat to those who just let them be. The Lost MC and the Aztecas are both outsiders who use the area to their advantage, with the lack of authorities allowing them to move drugs and guns with impunity. They don't care about the area in general, and they have no ties to the community outside of using them as a means to an end. Then there's Trevor Phillips Enterprises, which kind of winds up being a bit of both an outsider and a local. Trevor has managed to ingratiate himself with the people of the area and even has the chance to hang out with some of them, like his buddy Cletus, who likes to hunt everything from tires on moving vehicles to troublesome coyotes. If you look at the big picture with these four groups and the average citizens of the area, you can see a kind of organized anarchy taking shape. On the one hand, there are no real rules governing anyone. But on the other, there is a hierarchy where people put up with and ignore the gangs so long as the gangs ignore them. It's not a perfect situation, but it's the one that works for the inhabitants of the area. But is that the way that it should be? For millennia, people have struggled with and debated how society should be run. There are the extreme positions, complete anarchy and total dictatorial control, but most groups throughout history have come down somewhere in the middle. We've seen various forms of things like democracy, where the people of a society vote on what they want, to monarchies where a king or queen dictates life to the people below them, and even theocracies, where the rules are handed down by people who insist they are speaking for a deity. Each of these systems, and many more, have their flaws and benefits. But so far, none has really taken the mantle as the universally accepted best system. Looking at the people of Sandy Shores, some might say that it would be best if the government came in and made an effort to clean up the place, paving the way for more jobs and providing money to oust the criminal element and build the housing and businesses up. In the United States specifically, this kind of thing has actually happened many times historically, with the results being mixed. In 1887, the United States passed the Dawes Act, aimed at taking over land from Native Americans and assimilating them into the broader American culture. The act itself pulled over 90 million acres of land from Native Americans and forced them to upend the way of life that they were used to and become farmers and ranchers. They weren't really given a lot of options in the situation, as those who refused to go along were refused citizenship and would likely have been dealt with in extreme ways. Outside of outright taking the land, the government could just come in and provide money to improve the area overall. But this leads to another problem: gentrification. Providing funds to rebuild an impoverished or rundown area seems like a no-brainer. But as we've seen many times throughout history, it can also lead to drastic consequences for those who once called the area home. For example, a project in Los Angeles in the early 2000s to revitalize the neighborhoods in the Echo Park, Silver Lake, and Highland Park areas of the city wound up bringing in wealthier residents and driving up the cost of living in the neighborhoods, forcing those who'd called them home for years to relocate when they could no longer afford to live there. This same thing has happened in New York, Portland, Philadelphia, and many more cities across the United States and even around the world over the past several decades, as governments and investors have come into impoverished areas and built them back up, only to displace those who called the area home. But maybe we're looking at this all wrong. Maybe instead of trying to fix what we see as a problem, we should embrace the area as it is, or ask the people who live there what they want. Trevor, and many of the people that he interacts with, seem content with just kind of existing in their own little corner of the world. They've got a system that works for them, despite what we might see from the outside looking in, and maybe that's just how it's meant to be. Turning our attention back to Trevor specifically, though, there is one more thing to discuss. After dealing with the O'Neills and making his way home, Trevor meets up with Wade, who's been able to locate someone who fits the description of Michael Townley. And after a brief stop to wipe out the remainder of the Lost MC gang, the pair jump in Trevor's truck and make their way to the City of Saints. On the way, Trevor feels weighed in on his history with Michael in the form of a story that kind of goes off the rails while revealing a bit of who Trevor is deep down. When he was younger, Trevor dreamed of being a pilot, and after an altercation with a coach on his hockey team ended his chance at any kind of career there, he joined the Air Force and tried to earn his pilot's wings. That path wouldn't really work out for him either, as a psychologist labeled him as unstable and grounded him for life, and he spent the next few years kind of just lost and with no idea what to do. It was at this lowest point in his life when he met Michael Townley, a professional criminal, who would wind up becoming his best friend and help him to turn his life around. They would team up with one more guy, Brad, and continue their life of crime until Trevor realized that Michael seemed to be going soft. He'd been planning to cut Michael out and strike out with just himself and Brad when the job at the cash depot went sideways, with Michael winding up dead while Brad was sent to prison. Well, at least that was what Trevor thought had happened until he saw the news report about the jewelry store robbery and realized that his old friend might not be 6 feet under after all. And it's through this story that we can start to get a peek into Trevor's mind. He seems to feel a sense of betrayal at the possibility that Michael might still be alive, living somewhere in Los Santos without ever even trying to reach out to him. It's also clear that he valued their friendship and wants some kind of explanation from the man that he looked up to if it turns out that he isn't actually buried in North Yankton. All of this makes sense, even if Trevor's methods are a little bit extreme. The fact that he cares about what happened to Michael and has been writing to who he thinks is Brad in prison this whole time tells us that he has the ability to care for others. He even takes a moment on the drive to Los Santos to pull the car over at a viewpoint above the city to collect his thoughts. A moment where he mentions that he grieved for Michael when he thought he was dead.
So, Michael, this is where dead men come back to life, huh? It's been nearly 10 years, but you'll keep for another day or so, huh, old friend? You mother... I grieved for you! You weren't even dead. You were my best friend. Well, guess who's coming to shit on your doorstep, you fuck?
All of this paints a very different picture of Trevor from the one that we get when we focus only on his wild nature. And it shows that deep down there is someone there that wants to be at least a little in line with what society deems as normal. He wants to be part of a family, a group that looks out for and cares for each other. But some of that might be analyzing Trevor based on information we don't yet have at this point in the game, and I don't want to give away too much about my final assessment of him until we get further into the story. As he pulls into the driveway of Wade's cousin's house and sets up a temporary home in the city, we'll take a step back and save the big reunion between Trevor and Michael for next week. That video is going to bring the pair together for the first time in a decade to save Michael's daughter and introduce us to the world of the FIB as Michael pairs up with Trevor and Franklin to help out his old friend Dave. To make sure you don't miss out on that and all the other breakdowns I release in the Philosophy and Ethics in Games series, hit the like button on this video and subscribe to Lost in Games on YouTube. I release new videos every week, and while we've already covered some great games like Red Dead Redemption 2, Telltale Games The Walking Dead, Detroit Become Human, and many others, I've got some amazing titles planned for the next several months that you're not going to want to miss. If you're looking for other ways to support the channel, I've got channel memberships and a Patreon that will get you early access to videos, your name on the screen, and more, while helping me to buy new games to cover and acquire additional storage for the gameplay footage that I use in all of my videos. That's all I've got for now. I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.